In the vast expanse of the Valanthe Empire, where interstellar politics clashed with ancient traditions, a moment of unprecedented silence fell upon the chamber of the High Council. The Imperatrix Valeth raised her hand, not toward the 7 noble suitors arrayed before her throne, but toward the back of the chamber where a human man stood frozen, cleaning implement in hand. Her voice cut through the shock like a blade through silk as she declared her choice. The elder Korvax was the first to recover, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession. "Your Highness, this has no precedent. The selection right demands you choose from sanctified candidates. This creature is not even of our kind." But the ancient law was clear, and Valeth's silvered skin caught the bioluminescent light as she descended from her elevated seat. The law did not specify species, only that the chosen be present unbound and free of prior obligations. And he was present. Marcus Webb had been cleaning the energy ducts in the corner when the ceremonial doors sealed. He had tried to escape, but the guards stopped him. No one could leave during the selection rite. So he stood there, invisible as always, waiting for the elaborate ritual to conclude so he could finish his shift. Now every eye in the chamber fixed upon him. One of the pretenders stepped forward, his indigo vestments marking him as Prince of the Southern Reaches. "Surely you jest, Your Highness. This is a custodial servant. A human, no less. His species can barely manage interstellar travel. They are practically primitive." Valeth's voice carried a dangerous edge as she addressed the prince directly, outlining with clinical precision the very scandals that should have disqualified each of the suitors standing before her. She enumerated their corruptions, their debts, their crimes, all with a calm that made clear she would continue should they wish to hear more. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus found his voice at last, though uncertainty colored every word. He had not asked for this, had not sought to be chosen for anything. He was merely a man who had needed work and found himself on a space station far from home. But when Valeth turned those luminous golden eyes toward him and asked her questions about his marital status, his dependence, his ties to others, he answered with the honesty of someone who had already lost everything that mattered. There was no one waiting for him, no one who depended on him. And something in her expression shifted when she heard this, a recognition that seemed to pass between 2 lonely souls seeing each other clearly for the first time. The days that followed were a blur of ceremony and consequence. Marcus was provided with suitable clothing, regular meals delivered by servants who would not meet his eyes, access to gardens and information terminals, but no contact with the outside world. On the 4th morning, Valeth came to him in the guest quarters, and she was different without the formal trappings of the council chamber. Smaller somehow. Her silver hair fell loose around her shoulders, catching the light in waves that seemed almost alive. She explained the selection rite's true nature, not a ceremony, but a trap. 30 seconds to choose, or the council would choose for her. Prince Thess and had already corrupted enough members to ensure his selection. Marcus was convenient. He was present. He was unattached. And he was the only one in that chamber who wanted nothing from her. Marcus protested that she knew nothing about him, but Valeth simply smiled. She had observed him for months as he cleaned the council chamber 3 times each week. She had heard him hum sad songs from Earth when he thought no one was listening. She had seen him look at the small photograph he carried during his meal breaks, an image that somehow held both joy and heartbreak in equal measure. She was lonely too, she admitted, though her loneliness was cushioned in silk and ceremony rather than solitude and silence. They talked of loss, of how his wife Sarah had seen him when no one else did, how she had pulled him from the comfortable isolation of his grief only to be taken from him in a senseless accident. And Valeth confessed her own desperate need to be valued not for her lineage or her throne, but simply as a person. The investigation lasted 2 weeks. Marcus underwent medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and endless hours of questioning from council inquisitors determined to find something, anything, that would disqualify him. They investigated his childhood, his education, his marriage, his grief. They analyzed his genetic material and declared him biologically inferior, but not technically incompatible. They examined his work history and found nothing more damning than a single warning for using an unauthorized cleaning solvent. Through it all, Valeth fought. The Widow Empress visited him, disguising her updates as casual conversation, explaining how Valeth had argued before the entire council, contending that traditional interpretations of sanctified presence were based on obsolete, xenophobic principles. Some younger members were persuaded. The older ones were furious. When Marcus learned that the final vote was only 3 days away and the outcome remained uncertain, he made a decision that would change everything. He requested permission to speak before the council, a move the Widow Empress called highly irregular but not impossible. The council chamber felt different from this vantage point. Marcus had cleaned every corner of this room, but he had never stood at its center, never felt the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing down from the elevated seats. The 7 noble pretenders sat in the observation gallery, their expressions ranging from disdainful to curious. Marcus took a breath and spoke not as a politician or a lawyer, but as a man who understood truth. He acknowledged his inadequacy by their standards, a nobody with nothing to offer but the ability to clean things. But he turned that reality into a mirror held up to the council itself. The members of the Valanthe elite spent so much time looking at what they wanted that they never saw what stood right in front of them. They had investigated whether he was worthy of their princess, but they had failed to ask the only question that mattered: what did she actually need? He spoke of Valeth drowning in a cage of expectations and tradition, of every person in that chamber either trying to push her head underwater or pretending not to notice. He spoke of his own loneliness, his own understanding of what it meant to be seen as a means to an end rather than as a person. He told her with his voice steady and his heart laid bare that he could not promise to be everything she needed, but he could promise to show up every day and see her, not the princess, not the bloodline, but her, simply and truly. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Valeth rose from her ceremonial seat and walked across the chamber floor until she stood directly before Marcus. In her culture, what she did next was practically scandalous. She kissed him. Her lips were cool and soft, tasting faintly of something floral. When she pulled back, her golden eyes shimmered with unshed tears and something that looked almost like hope. She announced to the stunned council that she chose him, that she would continue choosing him until they accepted it or removed her from a succession entirely. And if they chose the latter, they would prove that the Empire valued tradition over its own future. The elder Korvax rose slowly, his 4 eyes examining the chamber in sequence. It seemed, he said dryly, that they had much to discuss. The session was adjourned. The vote was held in the early hours of morning. Marcus was not permitted to attend, so he waited in his chambers with the Widow Empress, who brought a bottle of something that smelled like liquid starlight, and poured each of them a generous measure. She told him that Valeth loved him, explained that Valanthe did not experience affection as humans did, but when they opened their hearts, it was completely. She asked if he was willing to try. When the summons came, Marcus was escorted to the throne room, a chamber far older and more sacred than the council hall. Bioluminescent patterns cover the walls, pulsing in slow rhythms that seemed almost like breathing. Valeth stood beside an empty throne, wearing ceremonial vestments of deep violet that made her silver skin glow. She looked exhausted but determined. The elder Korvax stepped forward with a ceremonial scroll. After extensive debate and consultation with their legal historians, the council had determined that Marcus Webb did indeed qualify as a sanctified presence under the original text of the selection rites. The ancient law made no specific reference to species, only to the requirement that the chosen be present, unmarried, and free of prior obligations. His selection was irregular, yes, but Valeth's willingness to renounce the succession rather than accept an alternative choice demonstrated the strength of conviction that they valued in their rulers. By 7 votes to 5, the council upheld the selection. Marcus Webb was recognized as the intended consort of Princess Valeth, with all the rights and responsibilities that position entailed. The gallery erupted in mixed reactions, some indignant, others offering what seemed to be genuine approval. Marcus barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on Valeth, who looked at him with an expression combining relief, joy, and terror in equal measure. He walked toward her, the crowd parting before him. When he reached her, he took her hands in his and spoke plainly. He did not know how to be a consort, did not understand her customs or politics or history. But he knew what it was to be alone in a room full of people, to be seen as a means to an end rather than as a person. And he knew that regardless of what came after this day, she deserved something better than what was being offered to her. The ceremony was held a month later, smaller than tradition dictated because Valeth insisted, and the council had already learned that arguing with her was futile. Close family, essential dignitaries, and a handful of others filled the ancient chapel where Valanthe royalty had married for generations. Marcus wore white, as was human custom. Valeth wore the silver and gold of her house, but she added a small touch that only he would understand, a ribbon of dark blue woven through her hair, the color of Earth's oceans, the color of the beloved. The vows were spoken in both languages. Marcus stumbled over the Valanthi phrases, and Valeth helped him through them, her fingers intertwined with his. When it was finished, when the final words were spoken, and the ceremonial bond sealed, the elder Korvax offered wisdom to the gathered witnesses. The princess had chosen her consort from among the most unlikely candidates in the chamber, a human, a servant, a man with nothing to recommend him except his character. And yet in doing so, she had reminded them what the selection rite was originally conceived to represent. Not political advantage or genetic superiority, but the recognition that true partnership cannot be designed or arranged. It must be chosen. Later, at the reception, Marcus stood on a balcony, watching 3 moons rise over an alien landscape when the widow Empress joined him. She told him he had done the impossible, convinced an empire to accept a janitor as its future imperial consort. But Marcus knew the truth. He had done nothing. Valeth had fought for it. He had simply stood where she pointed. When Valeth appeared beside him, having changed from her ceremonial vestments into something simpler, she asked if he was thinking of Sarah. It was not an accusation. He admitted that he probably always would be, sometimes. Her response was wisdom wrapped in love. She told him that he carried his past love with honor, and that this told her how he would conduct future love. She said she would rather share a memory with him than have someone incapable of such devotion. Marcus held her face between his hands, warm human skin against cool Valanthi silver. He told her he did not know what he had done to deserve a second chance, but he promised not to waste it. She answered that he had chosen to see her when no one else would. That was enough. That was everything. They stood together on the balcony while the moons climbed higher, 2 broken people learning to be whole again. Behind them, the sounds of celebration continued, nobles and diplomats and servants all mixing in the unprecedented chaos of Valanthi human union. But on the balcony, there was only this, a janitor and a princess, embraced against the darkness, choosing hope instead of history, choosing each other. And in the vast tapestry of the universe, that small choice echoed like ripples in still water, carrying with it the promise that love, stubborn, illogical, impossible love, could flourish in the most unexpected places. It took only someone courageous enough to point it out.